the success framework, we're going into brand. And what we're going to do is firstly celebrate that we've just done values, purpose, vision, legacy. You'll have some sort of picture of that. For some of you, it'll be like written everywhere, all over different things. Maybe you've used the structured template, maybe you've just used your notebook, but what you should have is at least a good sense of what's most important to you, why you're here, where you're going, and what you're going to leave behind. And all of that info feeds the strategy and planning sections of the success framework. And it might look something like this. And so my purpose, me, Rob Way, is to connect with people so that together we can learn, be better, and succeed. I value authenticity, pragmatism, courage, family, fortitude, being principled, being honest. My vision is to work daily with individuals to help grow their personal and business capability, people that have the entrepreneurial spirit and love the hustle and creating value for other humans. And what I'll leave behind for my family is passive income for the next 2 generations. I've helped amazing people, and I've helped people live and find their dreams and hopefully have the same joy out of life and career that I get. And so that story should be the foundation of why you do what you do. And we take that and we start shifting into the strategic section of the success framework, where we go into brand, business model, value proposition, and understanding competition, which might sound weird when we're talking about you as an individual. But I guess one of the things I would observe about consulting, government, being a contractor, doing business, whatever it is people don't necessarily go, oh, I need to call CorDelta, I need to call Chalfont, I need to call KPMG, or maybe KPMG if they need to cover their ass. They think, I need to go and get a specific human because they're going to solve a specific problem. And so that's the relevance of figuring out your personal brand. That's why having your own value prop matters. And so, yeah, some of this stuff might sound weird in the context of an individual, but when we actually start deep diving and unpacking, you begin to realize that actually Rob Way is actually competing with the other guy that's sort of pretty similar to Rob Way that can do the same sort of things. And there's only 3 or 4 of us that I'm competing with. Same with Ronaldo or M. There's only 3 or 4 other Ronaldos and M's out there that can do what you do in the way you do it. And so understanding this stuff for yourself, it starts to make a lot of sense when you think about you're not actually operating at whole of public service to public service or agency to agency or company to company. It's actually a people to people relationship. It's the same reason someone will bring Rob Way back or Ronaldo is because of these things that are natural right now, but at the end of the process we're about to go through, you can do with intention. So enough of the spiel on why it matters at the individual level. We'll start to see that as we go through the activities. The key brand elements that we're going to dive on is leadership, category, mind, perception, focus, sacrifice, attributes, and candor. And so obviously I'll elaborate on each of these things. And if you were to review the 22 immutable laws of marketing, Al Ries, I think it is. I'll have to research it and put a comment, but I can't think of their names right now. They wrote the book 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing. It is the best book on marketing. It is as it sounds. And so between business architecture, business strategy, and marketing strategy, the things that work amazing across all of those have been collected and put into this part of the program. And so leadership is all about what are you a leader in? Is it business analysis? Is it creative thinking? Is it personal development? What's your category? What are you first as in category as in, is it consulting versus public service versus, services versus outcomes based? What type of category do you own? What's the first thing that comes to mind when people think Rob Way? How are you perceived by other people when they think of you? What are the things that come to mind? What are you going to focus in on as your core value prop or core brand elements? What are you going to sacrifice? And so a great example of that is the conversation we were having around, for me personally, if I am to be an employee of another company, I need to sacrifice doing this type of work because it belongs, anything you do when you're employed by someone normally belongs to that entity. So depending on how you live your work life, there could be sacrifices you have to make. In the personal context of brand, it's, well, maybe you can do some special skill, like maybe you're great at research, but your core focus is on leadership and delivery management. So you need to sacrifice your ability to research to do the thing you actually care about. So sacrifice will be an interesting section to look at. What am I going to sacrifice that I pick at, that I'm never going to truly master, but I just sort of keep doing and it drains my energy, but it doesn't ever actually result in a return on investment. Attributes, we go in and we look at what are all the different attributes that relate to you as an individual. You know, it could be humor, it could be joy, it could be practical, it could be fun. What are the key attributes that relate to your brand? And candor, you know, what's the thing you need to be honest about? Probably a great example for me personally is LinkedIn, my website, my socials. All of it has a photo of Rob Way like 10 years ago. And it keeps getting used in these customer slide decks. And I've aged, I'm balding, and I've got a beard. And they see this bloody young photo and they're like, oh, wow, you're not the Rob Way we thought you were. And so, like, it's a great example of something I'm not, you know, necessarily been candid about, that I aged a little bit. Oops. So, yeah.
Don't worry,
so
Rob.
It's worse if you were to use that on dating sites.
Oh, that's what I was going to say.
True,
Don't worry.
true.
Tinder, it's all the rage. Put up something old.
Yeah, true. Good tip. I'll see what my missus thinks. So, in the world's biggest nutshell, these are the key elements that we're going to go through. On the website, I have a podcast of every single element. So sort of in the pre-frame, I was talking about there's a need to do a bit more research and and do some activities. So every single one of these elements, there's an audio already on the website ready to use. So we'll go through what we go through in this session. You'll hear all about it. You can refer to the video, but there's also the audio on the website, because some of this stuff you might need a reminder of, well, what's the activity I need to do to figure out how I'm perceived professionally or personally. But regardless, we'll get into all of that. So I'm going to define each element further, talk about the types of questions you might ask yourself to answer what the thing is. As you're listening to me go through these parts of the slides, if there's something that pops up, start taking notes, because this first little bit is, I'll talk, we'll go through it, then we'll loop back to the activities. But if something pops up, start writing it down, because your mind will start going. So leadership. It's better to be first than better. So let's use business architecture as an example. If whichever company is the company that is first to own the market in business architecture, it doesn't matter if someone is better at business architecture than them, because if you're first, you're the leader, and it's the key to success in brand. It doesn't even matter if you're worse. If you're first and you're the thing that comes to mind, that's where you win. So being first is key to a successful brand at the start. Finding what you're here, the leader in, the first step to knowing your brand is right. So it's about asking yourself, What do I do? What am I a leader in? What was I the first one to do? What was I first to market with? What am I a leader in? Who's in front of me? Who was first? These are the types of questions you want to ask yourself to understand what you're a leader in. And so not now, but soon, what we'll do is we'll go through and start listing out using either LinkedIn, or you're thinking about your career. If you've got a resume nearby, you could grab a resume, bring that up, go through what you've done and say, well, hang on, what was I the first at doing? What am I the number one at? When people think Solvay, they think Rob Way or M or Ronaldo. What am I first known for? And now, obviously, you might say, well, I'm not a leader in anything yet. And so from a personal brand perspective or business brand perspective, if you're not first, well, set up a new category that you can be first in. And so I'll use an example, personal work example. Delivery management is taken care of. Everyone's doing delivery. Security is taken care of. Everyone's doing security. But if I focus on security-centered delivery, well, that's my new category, which is delivering projects with security front of mind, underpinned by amazing delivery and security resources that ensure the right outcomes for government in a secure way, while delivering on time and on budget, stuff like that. So you take things that you're good at and you look at how can you create a new category. Another example would be the relationship between business and personal development. So the success framework, for example, underpins everything that I do in business, as opposed to having consultancy be on one side and personal and professional development on another. Bring them together to focus on a new type of thing to lead in. So if you're not a leader, it's about how do I create a new category? And so in marketing, the concept is all markets defied. So if you can't be first, create a new category to dominate. And so the activities that we're going to go to when we get to this is you're going to ask the question, what categories am I currently in? What other categories could I go into? And what new categories could we create? And so this is where we use a resume, like using the IT space. It's pretty easy if you've got a career of being a project manager, a data scientist, an analyst, a scrum master. They can often align to certain categories. But if there's some other underpinning thing that isn't normally focused on, you can look at how can I bring that in to create a new category. And so that's how we're going to get to a point where you can be a leader, thus meeting the first principle. Mind. It's better to be first in the mind than to be first in the marketplace. So what does that mean? Is if there's a problem that someone has and they go, Rob can solve that. First to mind. Doesn't matter if everyone else beat me to the market with whatever that product is, if I'm the first to mind for that product. So once you have your category or you're a leader in something, you want to be first to mind when people have the problem you solve. So figure out what you're first to mind for. Don't just think about it, ask people. This is where we get into sort of the non-self-reflective activities. And you might go to your friends, your family, your past colleagues, old friends, and say, what first comes to mind when you think of my business skills, when you think of my work, when you think of me as an individual and the work we've done together. And that will give you your first major data point, which is what's first to mind when they think of you. Could be personal, could be professional. Obviously, we're focused on becoming CEO of your career, so you apply it to career, but it can also be a powerful activity for your personal life. So not now, but later, once we get into homework stuff, one of the things that I'm going to challenge everyone to do is to go and ask a range of subordinates, peers, and leaders exactly that question. When you think of me, what comes to mind when you think about my work? And now that leads quite nicely into perception. Marketing is not a battle of products, but a battle of perception. So if you're first to mind for being a business analyst, the next step is to answer, how are you being perceived at being a business analyst? So if you are first to mind for project management, how are you being perceived as a project manager? And so you can imagine this in the context of, whenever someone thinks of Rob Way, they think security guy. Okay, but how am I being perceived by those people as a security guy? Am I competent? Am I highly skilled? Am I trusted? Am I well regarded? Am I poorly perceived? Do they think I lack education, lack knowledge? And these are all really, really useful data points to understand your existing personal brand. The other part is, you don't need to be the best, you just need to be perceived as the best to your customers. So in the consulting, contracting context, you just need to be perceived as the best. There might be 50 other business analysts in Canberra that are just amazing at functional requirements or amazing at, working with development teams. But if customers don't know they exist, it doesn't matter. So the questions that you'll start to ask is, how are you perceived by the market? How do people perceive the results you deliver? What do people think you do? And so, again, you can start to see how we've got another activity that is about asking people what can be confronting if the answers are different to your self-perception. Next, we look at focus. So the most powerful concept in marketing is owning a word in the prospect's mind, the prospect being your customers. So to make it easy for your customers, competition and staff, colleagues, people you work with, nail one word or phrase that you can own. And so you want to own it in your mind, in your customer's mind, in everyone's mind. So when the problem you solve comes up, people have a word to remind them of you. And so in NLP, we talk about anchoring. It's very similar to that concept of anchoring, finding what's that mental anchor or hook that relates to what you're a leader in, what your category is, what first brings to mind, how you're perceived. You need that word or key phrase that you can own. And like, I'll use an example. At some places I've recently worked, I got the security guy. And so the security guy was the words that first came to mind for me, for Rob Way, in that context. And so strong brand is all about having that word or phrase that comes to mind when your problem that you're an expert at solving comes up. So that's focus. And so likely how that'll play out in the activity part of today's session is, you'll come up with a list of words, but then you'll measure your list of words against how you're currently perceived and what comes to mind for you, and you'll start to see where are there similarities, and then that helps you figure out what to focus in on. Sacrifice. You have to give up something in order to get something. So I can tell with confidence that I'm guilty of this, of being able to do lots of different things to the detriment of doing anything. And so sacrificing some things can be important. You know, along what feels like a long time ago, I just did business analysis. I shut down all my websites. I shut down my blogs. I stopped doing any personal development stuff. And so that's an example of sacrificing something to do a thing. It just happens I'm now flipping the script where I'm sacrificing some of that other stuff to focus on this. And so you want to dominate every space. And if you want that, well, then this becomes a challenging activity. If you only own one space, it's about what is it that I'm burning energy on, that I'm not seeing a return on investment, that takes up time, that if I was to sacrifice, I could further live my purpose, have a solid brand, be perceived consistently. And so the questions that we'll ask yourself when we get to this is, what's pulling your attention and energy? What do you do that will produce little to no return on investment? And what might you have to sacrifice to get your 3-year or 10-year goals? And so, you know, we'll have to deep dive on that and see where we land. 2 more, attributes and candor. So for every attribute, there's an opposite, effective attribute. So what attributes exist in your context? What do you already own? What do you want? What does your competitors have? What is the key to your industry? Answering these things, and it'll help you and your customers understand who you are and understand your competitors' Achilles heel. So, for example, if fun, practical, honest, and direct are some examples of my attributes, serious, fluffy words, you know, hides the truth, those might be opposites of my brand attributes. Now, if people are looking for fun, direct, honest, candor, but they don't want those other things, they'll know where they get those other things. And so I think all of us have been involved in projects where you get vendors BSing you as a customer. And so those are example of the negative attributes that exist in this equation. And so the types of questions you're going to ask is, what attributes do you currently have? What attributes do your competitors have? And what are the opposite attributes of your competition? So if you identify another individual that competes for the similar work that you've grown up in your career with, you look at their attributes and you do some analysis and you say, oh, okay, well, Sarah Sorensen, you know, she's this. These are all the things I think about her. And then it's about looking at those attributes and saying, hey, well, what's the opposite of that? And that's where your opportunity lives. Your opportunity to build a stronger brand is having the positive traits of these negative attributes of people you're competing against. Candor, when you admit a negative, the prospect will give you a positive. So, for example, you know, hey, I know you saw my picture, but yeah, I've aged. The project I was just on took, 10 years off me, and this is what I look like now. And so saying that before anyone comments on the difference between my picture and my current state is an example of being candid about something that is going on for me. How you see that play out in the business context and the career context is you have a weird name that can't be spelled. Maybe your last name is Way, and so you always use the, give way joke. You have a horrible company name, or or you worked on a horrible project and everyone knows that project and it has a bad reputation. If you are candid about it, call it out, be honest, and handle the objection up front, people will give you a positive attribute or a positive through your candor. And so the questions that we're going to ask is what are some of my negatives? What's some of the negatives about the work I've done or the work I've been associated with? And so it's in doing that reflection around the negative stuff uncovers your opportunity to be candid about something. And so that's what we'll do when we get to candid. Okie doke. One last special one that I didn't point out is trend versus fad. And so what are the trends and fads in your industry that are shaping the market? A trend is something that keeps happening, keeps sticking around, keeps going forever and ever and ever. A fad is something that lasts for a minute. You know, TOGAF versus business architecture. You know, I can't even think. Scrum and Agile seems like it's a trend now. You know, 10, 15 years ago, it might have been a fad, but it has stuck around. Yo-yos. Is anyone playing with yo-yos anymore? It's a fad. Orbeez. Kids are playing with these stupid Orbeez balls. Like, it's a fad. It's not going to last. What you want to invest your time into is a fad. Is a trend. And so, you know, say your title is business analyst and you hear about a new trend of being a digital business analyst. Is that likely to be a fad or a trend? And so that's what this work is about, is figuring out when you reflect on your brand and all the things covered in these elements, are you focusing in on a trend or a fad? And so that's something we'll have to ask. And so the questions might be, what capability have you invested growing? You know, what have consistently been engaged to do? Is this an area that's continuing to grow, or is it just a spike because everyone's freaking out about it? And so, you know, maybe human-centered design might be an example. You know, human-centered design once upon a time might have been known as requirements gathering, talking to people and getting their needs. I don't know, probably not, probably a trend, but we still need to ask the question. And so, not yet, but in a moment, I'm going to pause the recording of this and know that you can ask each of these questions. If you were to go through the video or go through the podcast, you'd be able to go through each of these sections and start writing down your notes, taking notes, asking questions of people. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the recording and we can start getting into the brand activities where we'll go through mind and perception, focus and attributes, leadership and categories, and get into the writing section. So awesome. I'm really pumped to go through these activities, and let's get into that now.